Good morning.
Good morning.
San
Woo!
Francisco. It's Fleet Week.
Philadelphia.
And Oklahoma City. You're in there too.
We love you, Oklahoma. But not really.
Ooh.
Oh, because we're from Texas. Isn't this a rivalry?
Man, that really blows. Ooh.
Oh.
Tornado joke.
Poor
Oh,
Oklahoma.
Good
Of course,
morning.
hey, morning. Of course, we had a little tornado scare come through here,
We did.
I guess 2 days ago.
You know, having lived in Texas 25 years out of my 30 years, you think I would have it down, tornado
Yeah.
watch versus tornado warning, but I found myself doubting it. You know, I think it was Danny's fault because he said something like, "Oh yeah, watch is more intense," and I was like, "No, I don't think so. I don't think that's how it is."
Yeah, right? A warning sounds much more intense than a watch.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends because I mean, what do you yell at somebody? Warning!
Yeah,
Or do you
no.
yell, watch out?
Yeah, right. They
Yeah.
should have a tornado watch out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And then people would go out of their houses to watch it.
Or why
'cause
don't they just
that's where
call
we
it
live.
like more like there's a tornado?
I know. Shelter in place.
That's where
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what it is. It's like or tornado might be coming or tornado's here.
I know. We need to get a little more clear with this language.
I think
I'm
so.
sure people could still confuse it.
Yeah.
It was one of the fun things, and we're going to talk about this eventually. But you were going to bring on somebody to talk about statistics because when they do the weather with statistics, people don't know what that means either.
No, and I'm really looking forward to that. And so thanks for the reminder because you know, as I was doing my challenge for yesterday.
And
Yeah.
what was that challenge again?
Yes,
Yeah.
you know, for those of you at home and for Ryder here, I'll remind
Yeah,
everybody.
thank you.
Our challenge yesterday was to just do a rough outline for the rest of the week. And, you know, I actually found myself like, I really don't want to do this. I kind of, you know, had a little pit of in the feeling of my stomach if words made sense. You know what I'm trying
You had
to say.
a stomach pit?
A stomach pit. Yes, yes.
A sarlacc pit
I
in the
swallowed a
belly.
peach.
Oh,
A
there you
hole.
go.
Yeah, and so now there's a pit in my stomach. But yeah, I was like, I don't want to plan out the rest of the week because I know there's all these things that I need to do that I've been putting off. Can you relate?
Yeah, I can. And the funny thing is, once you write it all down, then you actually might have to, like, I don't know, think about those things.
Yeah, or at least acknowledge the fact again that you didn't do it. You know?
Yeah, which is more likely.
Yeah.
No, you know, one thing with Rome research, since we talked about that a little yesterday, I tend to use that as a tracking system, and that helps. But I did not honestly do the challenge yesterday.
Yeah.
I just didn't get around to it. I have like 15 things going on. I'm supposed to be, I mean, it would have been a great week to do it.
Yeah.
And I didn't.
Well, that's kind of the irony of the thing, right? Is the busier you are, the more important, and I would argue that it becomes. And I've realized this myself, especially because, you know, being a consultant for the couple of people that I have, it's a great thing because, you know, obviously, hopefully I'm helping them in some ways, right? But also, you know, by giving them advice and telling them the things to do, it's reminders for me and telling me like, look, dude, why aren't you doing all those things that you said you should be doing?
Buck up, buddy.
Yeah.
I know. There is something about the hypocrisy of you need to be doing X, Y, and Z, but I'm just going to sit here. And I mean, you have kind of seen this with one of the memes that I've had sent to me on multiple occasions is Jordan Peterson.
Okay.
Who, of course, is one of his famous pieces of advice is to make your bed in the morning or clean up after yourself, something like this.
Start with some small win, basically.
Yeah, and it shows him during like a Zoom call at that room that he is in and completely trashed.
That's
it's
hilarious.
Like no one has picked up after themselves in weeks.
That's great.
And it's just, it's just one of these things that he looks all disheveled and everything else. And so, yeah, it's very difficult to sort of be these purveyors of truth or whatever in advice and then not follow it yourself.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And for those who aren't aware, Jordan Peterson, and augment my description as you see fit, but I think he's a Canadian professor, very smart guy. He's talked a lot about self-improvement, productivity, things along those lines. And I think he kind of started to benefit a lot from the ability of lectures and things to go online. And I think is a type of thing where he started to get some traction and got some more, interest and things like that. And he's kind of one of the bigger names in that space, if you will.
Yeah, and there's kind of something interesting about him because I looked into him for a while, and we don't need to go off on this too far, but I have a tendency to, but yeah, he did something, a book called Maps of Meaning, which is this kind of epic thing of kind of mixing in like psychology and Jung and going through all these ways that people form meaning in their lives.
Young meaning Carl Jung.
Carl Jung,
Yeah, with the
yes,
J.
yeah, thanks, Carl G. Jung. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know what, but yeah, apparently he's very Carl Jung is very difficult to read because it's very complex, and but one of the things he did is try to actually do all these things, and then he kind of got caught up in a scandal that had to do with naming conventions and the legality of naming conventions. Can you force somebody to call somebody else by their pronouns or otherwise declare that it's a hate speech act? And so when he kind of stood up against that kind of policy, then all of a sudden he was embraced by the right and decried by the left, and it sort of started off a pretty tumultuous career. I don't think he's a ill-intentioned fellow, but he became kind of a punching bag for the left for a while, and if anything, that made the right to love him even more.
Yeah.
So it's just skyrocketed his fame, but maybe not in all the directions you would want it to be skyrocketed.
Well, that's an interesting thing, and I would love to be a fly on the wall in those backroom discussions because it'd be like, all right, look, dude, here's your options. Like, you try and fight this tooth and nail, and your career probably either stays here or goes down,
Right.
or you accept some of the bad and accept that this isn't exactly how you wanted to get the fame and isn't exactly how you wanted to do. But at the end of the day, he still gets to control what he says. So, maybe he plays to that audience a little bit to keep that momentum so he can help all the other people that he would want to. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'd be curious to hear.
It is interesting when you do get a platform, and this ties into what we're going to be talking about today. But you get this platform, you have the right to speak, but you probably start losing some other rights, and one of those might be privacy. And once you become celebrity, everyone seems like they have an opinion on their life, and their opinions about you are valid. And this is a very strange space to be in, which most of the time, most people, believe it or not, Reed, they are not thinking about us.
I don't think we've ever said that one before.
No?
I don't know. So yes, I'm glad you led into privacy quite nicely, which is one of the big things we'll be talking about today. But let's have one more thing about the task that we had yesterday, the challenge. I would argue that the busier you are, the more important it is for you to take some time to step back and analyze what's going on, and then plan out just a little bit. And the way I tackled that, like I said, I kind of had that pit. I didn't really want to do it, and I didn't end up doing it yesterday. I actually did it this morning. And that's a technique that I use sometimes, which pros and cons, right? But it's like, I just really am not feeling this thing, and you know what? I feel like I'm gonna have a fresh mind and a fresh start or whatever. Do it in the morning, and I find that especially for some things that I'm like dreading doing like the rest of the day. Well, eventually I just be like, you know what? I'm just not gonna do it today, and then I'm gonna do it tomorrow, and then I kind of can relax and let that thing go away. Take that space out. Have you ever done that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I like it in one respect, in that yes, I set myself up to almost never publish anything the day that I write it.
That's
I
probably
always
good.
like to sleep on it first, which has made this podcast.
Yeah, say welcome to the
interesting,
live
right?
show.
Yeah, I know. Because I tend to find that my thoughts and behaviors, it will catch on a certain point while I'm sleeping. I'll wake up the next morning and I'll have a slightly different version of ideas that I'm more interested in, or I don't like the way this is phrased, or that's problematic. And so I tend to like to sleep on things, but one thing I realize is if I don't think it's finished the day before, then I don't get the full benefit out of trying to do it in the morning. So I use that trick, but I also kind of have to set myself up for it.
Yeah, I feel that. But yeah, so once I did that, which again, use a word of caution, right? Because especially if you don't allocate yourself that much time the next day, or you accidentally sleep in or whatever, then all of a sudden, you have a hard deadline, which can be motivating. It can be a good thing, but it also can stress you out and be a bad thing, right? And so, yeah, but the main point I wanted to make was what I ended up doing. It took me less than 5 minutes, and I put down a couple bullet points. It's like, all right, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And I didn't go as far as the next steps of maybe, okay, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to do that on Wednesday. But just writing down those 5 bullet points at the very least was good for me to be like, all right, at least I have a little bit of a feel of the things that I want to do. And now I know, and now that's out there, and I can start to at least in the back of my head prioritize and things like that. And of course, I would encourage people to take those next steps, right? And that's what I'll do, later today as I start to get more into it. But yeah, just that initial writing out of those bullets, I think it can be surprisingly helpful, especially because you start to think of the things that maybe you forgot about, or maybe they're just not top of mind, but they're still very important.
Yeah, no, that's one of the best things about writing anything down is it does a couple of great things. One of them is to get everything out of your head into a place where you can see it, which oddly enough frees up your mental space for you to do other activities. I think that's one of the Kanban techniques that we could talk about at some other point in the future. But there's a lot of productivity techniques that are all about getting all this extra stuff that's floating around in your head out, because otherwise you're slightly worrying about them or you're slightly holding on to these things all the time. And we often don't even know we're holding on to something until we make a concerted effort to get out everything that's in there.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure. And that's one of the biggest benefits in my mind. And outside of my mind is when you write things down, you get it out of there, right? And especially for things that may be causing you anxiety, even if you don't use that word for it, you're feeling that pit in your stomach, you kind of tense, maybe you're clenching a little bit, maybe you're kind of stressed. If you're feeling any of those kind of negative, uneasy things, like, okay, well, one of the first things to do is write down all the things so you can kind of wrap your arms around it, and then release that space in your head where you're worrying about all those things, whether or not you realize it, right?
Yeah, that's the beauty of the calendar, is that you can actually say, you know what? I have X, Y, and Z to do, but I don't have to worry about that till Thursday.
Yeah,
I don't have to worry about that. That's on the calendar for Friday. So today, I'm not going to think about it. If I finish my work early today, awesome. I have the rest of today. You don't always need to be jumping into the next task just to stay productive, because part of the reason we do any of this productivity is quality of life.
Yeah.
You want to be super productive and smart, and we do all these calendaring things so that we can actually, work smarter in the moment and then enjoy that free time that we have left over.
Yeah. And we got to make sure we don't fall into the trap of trying to do too much or doing it or whatnot. And then also, and this is a topic I want us to talk about more at length another day, but the topic of grace. And that's both for others, but I would argue more importantly for yourself, right? For
sure.
Being okay, like, hey, yeah, I didn't do that thing I said I was going to do, right? Obviously, there's a balance of, always giving yourself grace and not actually doing anything, right? And then the flip side of never giving yourself grace and always beating yourself up. But you got to have at least some grace in your life in order to stay sane, really, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And yeah, I was just listening to a Hidden Brain episode on forgiving yourself.
Oh, nice.
Which is, having compassion for yourself. Honestly, it's weird to think that self-love, not in the sort of narcissistic sense, but just in being okay with who you are and seeing your flaws, allows you to have compassion for other people.
Well, I'm sorry for you all the time.
Yeah.
Wait.
But you're really, does it help you out?
Oh, that's how it's supposed to work, right?
Yeah, that's how it works.
Oh, I'm sorry about you.
About you. I'm just sorry in general when I see your face.
Speaking of your face, let's get the daily morning writer close up. Yeah. I'm Reed Garcia, founder of Helpful for Life.
And this is Ryder Richards. I already said random dude on a couch.
Oh.
Random dudette on a couch.
Ooh. Ooh. Don't assume my dude gender.
Yes, the guy that's going gray on the couch. That will be my title for today. Guy that's going
gray on the couch. All right, Gandalf over here.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, hey, so today we are TBD. That is our show. We haven't changed our outline yet. And I'll be perfectly honest. I've not 100% committed yet to the name. But, that's one of those things about kind of learning out loud and branding out loud is once you have something, you get to stew with it for a little bit. And it's been 2 weeks we haven't decided. What's another couple of days as we were kind of feeling it out and seeing how things roll off the tongue. And that's the thing. And we won't dive into this because we could spend a long time talking about it. But thinking about the show through all these different lenses, like, okay, if this is the first thing someone hears about it, or somebody says, hey, go look this thing up, or you invite somebody to be on your show, those are all kind of different lenses to view it through. Like, okay, if I'm trying to get, this really prestigious person to do this thing, and my show is called Butts and Titties, then they're gonna be like, yeah, that's a great name.
I'm in. Yeah. I mean, the kind of guest that we want to come on the show.
Yes. Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes. Hey, Neil. I know you've been waiting for a chance to let go, buddy. This is it. This is a show for you.
Have you seen the Key and Peele bit where Jordan Peele he's like Neil deGrasse Tyson, and it's great because he's like, why Neil deGrasse Tyson's wife can't ever argue with him, and so she like says something, or like, why'd you leave your shoes on here, and then he's like, well, it's all relative, and he just goes into this like astrophysicist space, and then he also has this like little quirk on his face where like, you know, he knows what he's doing, and you know he knows what he's doing. It's pretty good. So yeah, you should check that one out.
Yeah, I will. I love the anger translator they had with Obama.
Oh, that's great.
Was fantastic.
We're totally gonna be hijacking that and using that in some other ways.
Yes.
But yeah, so we've had this intro for Helpful for Life for a long time, and have we played it at all yet on this show?
Oh no, why would we?
Yeah,
actually, I think we played it
one time.
Yes.
But let's play it one more time to let's just say, hey, here's Helpful for Life. Helpful for Life. All right, now we're back.
Hey, that was lovely.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pretend that like this was a set change. We
yes.
just moved around,
wow.
new background. Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Fancy.
Dynamicism.
Yes.
Is that a word?
It is now.
It is now.
Yeah.
So today the topic at hand is privacy. And, one of the reasons that I thought of that was, as some of our dedicated listeners may know, on Friday, I made a challenge for us to do something we've been procrastinating on. And for me, that was hanging a curtain in our room, in our living room. Yes, we had those lovely vertical blinds. So we've now taken those off, and we went to hang the curtains, and we realized they were too short. But no worries. So that's what we realized, Sunday night at 11 o'clock when we were doing it, trying to get it done before Monday. And then yesterday, Danielle's like, okay, I'm going to go to the store. I'll pick up some more. And so we've been doing the online order through Walmart, # not sponsored. But it's hard to beat, pulling up in your car and they just load all the stuff in. Yeah. Is very nice. And so she was like, oh, I'll get the curtains from there. She looked on the app and she did it. But then she realized, oh, those are only available online for order.
Of course, yes.
So now we're on day 2 of having no blinds at all in our living room, which are, for those who aren't aware of what our living room, which is hopefully most of you, they're giant glass sliding doors.
Don't worry, I'll post a picture online.
Yes,
perfect.
Give
you a map location to wherever Reed lives.
Yes, exactly. And so that is one of the things that came into mind was privacy. And also, as we're doing this show and as we are, being our authentic selves and sharing parts of ourselves, it's something that, it's in the back of at least my mind, and I'm sure it is in the back of yours as well. Because, we want to share. We want to be real. We want to help you guys, but we also have a little bit of privacy and security concerns for ourselves.
I have nothing to hide.
Yeah, nothing to hide.
Absolutely nothing.
So he lives at 555.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, so privacy I think is an extremely interesting topic, and it has so many facets, and we're not going to be able to cover them all today, but we're going to start the conversation, and we'll pick it up some other days because there's literally so much we could talk about.
Yeah, this could be 2 or 3 different episodes. So we were starting this, Reed and I were joking around about it a little. What's fascinating is I have friends. I'm thinking of one in particular.
Wow, Ryder has friends.
Actually, he's my wife's friend that I've kind of co-opted. Just leeched on.
Yeah, like a leech, or like a, what was it? The thing we were saying the other day, like a virus where you buy in and it just starts to spread.
Right. Yes. It's a type of parasite.
There you go.
I'm kind of a worm.
So you have a friend, anyways.
So anyway, this guy. Yeah, I know.
An acquaintance.
Yes, he is very much in the camp that privacy just doesn't matter. This is not a thing that we should, everyone's doing it. They have so much information. Who cares? Whatever. You are not unique. Everyone does weird crap online, and you're, whatever you're concerned with, he's just like, it's too late.
Yeah.
And so he's just skipped over this whole idea of like trying to protect yourself through privacy. He's just done with it. And so I could see how somebody listening to this might just be like, I'm not interested at all. I've already like given up caring about privacy. This is something that I cannot fight.
Well, see, that's the thing that I think makes it a little bit more interesting today versus, I don't know, even 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't really have to think that much about it before, because before the advent of personal computing devices and,
Mm-hmm.
more importantly, the internet, you didn't really have to think about privacy in that realm. It was more like, hey, to especially to use America as an example, right? It's like, hey, this is my house, this is my quarters. Like, you can't come in here without my consent. And especially when it comes to the government, talking
Yes.
about the rights to be searched or the right for things to be seized, um, and also like, hey, neighbor or random passerby, like, you can't come on my land, or guess what, I'll shoot you,
Yeah.
or
Right.
right to bear arms, or I'll somehow have the right to do harm to you, right? But when you're on
Yeah.
my property.
Yeah, and this is, we could go back into the concepts of property itself and how bizarre that is that it even exists. That somebody gets to own something that no one else could own. You didn't make it, you just claimed it. That's a weird thing unto itself. But what gets even more fascinating is whether or not privacy was even a thing as far back as the 1600s. It might be a concept that's only 200 to 300 years old, because previously you lived in tribes or groups and people lived in communal housing. And in certain communities, there was no way anyone had privacy. Even kings and queens didn't have privacy because they had people waiting on them all the time. They had maids and servants and this, that, and the other. So if you're at the top echelon or at the bottom, there was no such thing as privacy. And privacy might have come about as part of the middle class, which is kind of an interesting back history on this concept. We now think that it's a right that we have and that
Yes.
we should have, and we think it's natural. It's not natural. The entire thing was created due to the systems and civilization that we live in.
Yeah, and that balance between something that we are due, something that we are owed, something that we deserve, something that we have a right to, versus something that just happens to exist in society and a lot of people have it and therefore we feel like we should have it. That balance, maybe that's not the most succinct wording of that balance, but that, I think that's a really important topic, amongst a bunch of different things.
Yes, yeah, it's kind of a fascinating little hole to jump down into, but the only reason I bring that up at all is because whenever people claim that something is their right, it's like, well, yeah, let's think about that, process it, and then maybe we do, maybe we don't. But we live in a culture that does assume that this is a right, and I think legally we supposedly have certain rights about it. But what's fascinating is those rights seem to continually be eroding or repealed or taken away from us whenever we think that we could use them the most.
Yeah, that's for sure. So we're talking about privacy, and so far we've talked a little bit about the history of it. We've talked a little bit about the tie to government. We've kind of alluded to the fact that privacy is somehow important with technology and personal computing devices like cell phones, computers, and things like that. Just to talk about another couple of things that may come up, we mentioned security. In today's day and age, with that combined with technology, things like cameras, and we could get into it as well about the when you get to COVID and the do I share whether or not I have my vaccines or not? How or if do I share whenever if I'm exposed to the illness? And there are
Mm-hmm.
various approaches, things like that. But privacy and security has been much more in the news, in the last few years, especially than it had in the past. And one of those other things that comes with that is companies using that to their advantage and marketing towards it. And I think Apple is kind of one of, if not the most preeminent brands, at least for the average everyday consumer, that's been really leaning into this. And I'm sure you probably have some thoughts about the downsides of that.
Oh, maybe I do, but I'm kind of interested. I mean, you're probably more in touch with some of this than I am, especially as far as things like Apple and being an engineer. I'm sure that you have a lot of background in this that might come in real handy. So, yeah, you go off, and then I'll chime in if I have anything.
Perfect, perfect. So yeah, so let's talk a second about um, let's talk about who or what is the product, right?
Yeah,
Because I
right.
think this is kind of a common thing that helps frame what privacy is today and why it's important. Um,
Yeah, no, I mean, there's some famous sayings about it, right? That
yeah,
if you aren't paying for something, right? If you're not buying a product, you are the product. I think there's a phrase that's something like that, and it shows up quite a bit. It shows up in Social Media or Social Dilemma, which was a Netflix documentary on social media and privacy. And then uh, one of the big sort of hallmark people in the space is Shoshana Zuboff, who wrote Surveillance Capitalism. And they talk a lot about who and what is the product, right? Because it's not only what is the product, you're not just buying an iPhone, you're not just downloading a free app, you're not getting anything for free. So, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And by the way, while you're sitting here talking, I'm thinking that I know somebody that you know who might be interesting to talk to about privacy,
Oh,
because I'll let you decide whether or not that happens. But
okay. Yeah.
it just popped in my head, so I figured I would share.
There's a guest that we could bring on that I know that
Yes,
thinks a lot lot about it, and
yeah. We're not
yeah.
going to call that person a friend because we're not sure about
If
writers.
writer can have
Yeah,
friends, yeah.
but anyways, we'll respect your privacy on that one.
Thank you.
So yeah, so the fact of if you are not, paying for a thing, that's kind of check number one is think about um, who is benefiting from this thing that I'm doing, and monetarily is certainly one of the ways. There are other ways as well, which are worth considering, which is maybe they can leverage something that they know about you to somehow do something else somewhere,
Mm.
which could be related to power, of course, could be related to money, could be related to some other interest that you just may not even be privy to. Um,
Well,
but
what's an example of something like this?
yeah, an example of something where, well, okay, where money isn't really the main thing. Is that what you're asking,
Well,
or?
I don't know. My one of the things that popped into my head because I'm trying to think of a way to ground this so people can kind of understand how it works is um, I remember hearing that these things like the Fitbits, you do pay for the Fitbit, right? But the app tracks all your data. It shares that data with Apple. You can link that system up. But really, none of this stuff is, you're not being charged for any services to this awesome app and all the things it's doing. And what I heard was that all of this information is being sold to insurance companies.
Yes, yes, which gets into another thing that we can definitely talk about how the pros and cons of that, right?
Yeah, so there's this kind of backside of revenue that they're pulling in by sharing your data that you don't know you're giving to insurance companies, but then insurance companies might randomly adjust your rates
Yes,
based off of Fitbit data for your, I don't know if it's individual, but I think it's block groups that
sure,
they do the demographics by.
sure. So yeah, so first off, I wanted to say nothing immediately hopped to mind that wasn't connected to money. That's not to say
Yeah,
that that doesn't exist, right?
yeah.
One of the big areas probably would have to do with politics, government, power, corporate things. But nothing's immediately hopping to mind. So we'll kind of table that one for now because there's plenty to talk about that does involve money, right? Um, but one of the things you're alluding to is privacy with relation to medical things, well, not even necessarily medical, but in this case is medical, but it could be any type of insurance, right? But that reminded me of one of the documentaries that I saw a few years back. It was called 2057. I think it was out in 2007. So it was
Okay.
like, hey, what will the world look like in 50 years? So even today, it would be interesting to go back and watch because it's been 14 years to see how well the predictions stack up versus what happened today, right? But one of the things they have in there is they show a guy just in his regular day, and he wakes up out of bed, takes a piss, and then he goes about his day. Well, as he pees, the computer starts analyzing his pee, and actually, I think he may have even used some clean pee or something like that because he wanted to hide the fact that he was drinking because he didn't want his rates to go up.
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah. So the insurance company would analyze the pee in your house and then
Yeah.
and then bump your rates up. So then all of a sudden so what does this train humans to do? It sounds like it just trains us to be more sneaky.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. If you have a rule, you have a framework, we're going to figure out some way to weasel around it, right? But yeah, so let's talk about how data can be valuable and how having free services can actually be dangerous. And I want to just hop back briefly to kind of the introduction of the advertising supported model. And, to,
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to talk to someone who's a historian in it, but at least from my view, that really ramped up whenever you started to get national publications. You got newspapers, you've got magazines. That is probably when the advertising business started to take more of a boom, because you could have some people working on a small thing that is then blasted out to lots and lots of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then guess what? After they do that, then the consumers go and act accordingly. They go buy a thing, right?
Yeah.
And then it only just got stronger and more compelling and more money put into it. I don't have the data to back this up, but I'm pretty sure this is true, as it moved into radio, and then it moved into TV, and as it moved into now the internet, and then even further now towards personalized internet and personalized devices. And it used to be much more broad, right? It was like, oh, I saw a billboard, or
Right.
all 300 million of us saw a TV ad, or we
Yes. Yeah.
all heard a radio ad. Whereas today, it's something more along the lines of like, we recognize that Ryder, although he is a tall man, he wishes he was very small, and therefore he has a fetish with dwarf hats. And therefore, we're going to advertise dwarf hats to him.
How did you know?
Exactly. And how did you know
My
is a great
tiny
question.
hat collection. Yeah.
Yes. So that's where you get, and a more realistic targeting would probably be like, oh, I want to target people who are, so we're talking about Ryder here, 70 to 75 years of age within this zip code, with this level of income. Those are the types of targeting that advertising companies can do, because whether or not you realize it, as you're going throughout your day, I like to think of us like Linus in Charlie Brown. He's the character where he walks around, he's just got a cloud of dust coming off of him.
Right.
Well, that's what you're doing as you're going throughout your day. You're just spewing all of this data about yourself.
Yeah, into this sort of invisible frequencies, right? Like we don't see the range, but it would be fascinating if we ever got the goggles that allowed us to actually see how much noise we're like bombarded by, electronic noise and different RF frequencies and everything. Like it could be really fascinating. Like you just see somebody be like, oh man, like they're leaking all this information out into the world.
Right.
And maybe it would be a social fad at that point to be somebody who is closed down or silent, right? You'd wear your RF cage or whatever around with you. Yeah.
Yeah, your tinfoil hat. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, so let's use Facebook as an example. I think they're one that a lot of people can relate to. Maybe they've even seen The Social Network. But I think most people at least know what Facebook is and are roughly familiar with it. So let's use them as an example. So with Facebook, which is a free service, by the way, you first off, when you set up your account, you electively tell the company certain things you do. And I don't know this for a fact, but I think that's actually shifted. They don't emphasize that as much as they used to, and it's more so about the things you look at and the things that you do. Whereas at the beginning, it was all about what signals am I intentionally putting out to the world. And so, I don't know, back when I made Facebook, I honestly don't even know what I said. I was like, oh, maybe I'm interested in soccer and video games and food or whatever. But then I never touched that thing for ever again.
Yeah, it seems like the purpose of these things have evolved as well, but you're absolutely right about these being free products, and then people feel they have this tremendous right to complain about anything Facebook does.
A right to
and they're
complain,
like, which is really funny too. It's like, wait, you're using a free software and you're going to keep complaining whenever they steal your information or they manipulate you or they use something poorly. And it's kind of like, I mean, it is very bizarre. It's kind of like television. You could just turn it off.
Yeah.
You could just choose not to use it anymore. Yet we somehow feel embedded and connected in these platforms. And what gets really scary about this is that because they know us so well, they feed us things that make us feel like part of our life is on there. It's like there's some sort of social communal dilemma that we have. We want to look good and mirror ourselves through our peer groups. And that's like an evolutionary basis. That's part of who we are as creatures. And they've somehow tapped into that, and they get hooks in you really deep, and you remain within these platforms, even though it'd be quite easy, like
theoretically, right?
to shut them off.
No, and that's the thing that I've actually seen the internal calculations go through some of my friends and family as I tell them something like that. Or even, last week we had a challenge for people to turn off their notifications, or to start using do not disturb mode more.
Yeah, right.
And I can see in some people's minds when I tell them like, no, just turn on do not disturb for an hour. And then you can see them like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that because
no.
I need the things. And
yeah. And what if, and danger, security, fear, like all this weird stuff. That's one of the things that cracks me up the most is when most people are telling me, well, what if something bad happened? I'm like, what are you going to do about it? And usually the answer is nothing. I just need to know right away so I can be freaked out along with everyone else.
Yeah.
Like that communal bonding is really strange, and this idea that like to be the first to know. Like, and that might take us back as well to like an evolutionary basis of why communication even started. But anyway,
that's a good point. No, of course, I'm just like you. I'm seeing all of the tangents, right? But yeah, so Facebook, free product. Why is it in Facebook's interest to offer a free product, right? But that's because they can sell your data to advertisers, right? They can tell people about you, right? And if I am a company, let's say I'm a women's dress company, right? I can then
yes, let's say that. Let's say that's what you are.
Let's say I'm a tiny nomad company.
Okay.
No, let's say that I own a women's dress company and I want to know a little bit more about women 18 to 25. Well, if I want to find out some information about that, I could go to Facebook and say, hey, tell me about what they're interested in. Tell me about all these types of things so I can learn a little bit more about them. But also, if I know that I want to target someone specifically, it's like, oh, well, I want people who are a little bit into anime, but they're also really into high fashion. And so they're like this mix of like nerd, but also stylish. And so that kind of goes in line with our brand. So I'm going to pay Facebook to basically direct my ad towards these people. And then those people will see the ad, right? Even though, one of the common arguments people make is, well, why not just have Facebook have a pay model, right? When it's like, oh, I Reed could pay $5 a month or $10 a month or whatever.
So you mean like YouTube?
Yeah, that's a good question, because with YouTube is an interesting one, right? Because they show ads unless you pay for their premium version. But guess what? Even if you pay for that premium version, you are getting rid of the YouTube ads, but you're still getting the ads that are coming from within the content itself.
Got it.
Which is an interesting development that's happened largely within, at least in the online content world, has been amped up within the last few years especially. And you could see that also. A better way to see that historically is something called product placement in things like radio and TV. However, historically, that's been exactly.
Coffee.
Right, showing his coffee mug up to the camera here. But historically, that's something that's been kind of subtle, or not subtle. Not so subtle. It's been more in your face, right?
Yeah. Well, and it sort of depends on which era and time period you're talking about. James Bond drinking a Heineken was a big deal, right? Because he's gone from the martini to beer. And then the product placement will show up in all these movies and all these things. And then all of a sudden it changes the reputation of this, whatever, a drink, a kind of laptop. But then we got to the point as well where you couldn't show an Apple computer in the movies because Apple would then sue you for placing their product in there because you were leveraging their coolness for your own coolness. They're like, no, you have to pay us for this or else we will pay you for this. Like the whole thing gets really bizarre.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it all becomes down to how people are perceiving the product, right?
Yes.
And how much they want it and who has it and the status that's associated with it. It gets a lot into psychology for sure. But yeah, so they have the Facebook, and then some people say, oh, let's pay. Well, guess what? Facebook, it is not in their interest for you to pay because you realistically are not going to pay enough money to outweigh the value that they're getting on the back end.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, and so that is why there isn't a paid model. And then also, but let's just go down that rabbit hole for a second. What if that paid model did exist? Well, then you get into the ethical discussion of, well, okay, well, now you're just using socioeconomic class to say, well, you have to be middle class or higher to be able to essentially afford this thing.
Right.
And therefore, privacy is something that comes, as you make more money.
Right, and this is there's lots of paid models that sort of move into that space, and even things like TSA pre-check. that's a privileged model that requires a little bit of money and having the right kind of cards and certifications to not be hassled when you go through an airport, just a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And these are all these models kind of exist in multiple places where a little bit of money can make your life just a little bit easier. But what is interesting about Facebook is they have made a decision to keep this open because they're more interested in having every user in the world, every person in the world on their platform than they are in making a few bucks off of everyone, like individually.
Right.
So that model has really shifted to where anyone can use it, and we will just collect all of this data. And then what are we going to do with it, right? That's the sort of one thing is they're using it for advertising, but there's some other things that they've been doing as well, such as they've been in trouble recently for what was it, the child version of Instagram that they wanted to create because of course Facebook owns Instagram. They wanted to do a specific children's version of Instagram even though they have data that proves, a whistleblower came out and says that they have data that proves how disruptive and painful it is for especially young girls to be on Instagram.
Yeah.
It really messes with them. And some of the highest suicide rates have been teenage girls. And a lot of this they attribute to social media, yet they wanted to make a special version to catch kids when they're even younger.
Yeah.
Give them this platform.
Which is, the analogy I'm sure has been made to tobacco companies,
For sure.
and how, especially back in the day, like that's the trick is like a lot of people don't realize it, but these social media platforms are a lot like a drug. They're even though you're not consuming anything like in your mouth or whatever, like you are triggering these brain chemicals, which is triggering these responses and these habit loops, which is getting you effectively addicted. And so that's one of the things that they try and do, right, is get their hooks into you as early as possible, so that way they can extract as much value and money out of you as possible.
Yeah.
But real quick, though, speaking of things that, will try and extract as much money out of you as possible, gypsies. Gypsies. And, I think what better...
What a great segue.
What a better time to transition a little bit off of the privacy topic and lean into, one of our local gypsies here. We did it last Tuesday for the first time, and we had Danielle come in for a tarot reading. And she is not a gypsy, but since I feel like the mystical and tarot is often kind of associated with gypsies, I thought it might be a nice little tie-in.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating as well that I think there's this idea of the gypsy being somebody who is off the grid, right? Or they're not playing by normal societal rules. And they have all sorts of sneaky ways of getting around things like privacy. So there's something kind of fun to think about in terms of there are fringe pockets of the world that do actually engage in this kind of secretive and hiding behaviors. And you can start looking around at people like, I don't know, organized crime and stuff like that. But of course, they're still using digital technologies now and have to be really careful about how those get tracked. But of course, I don't know. I do know there's a real fun story when we were in Italy. And my little sister lady said, hey, would you like to see my baby? And walked up to my little sister and she was like, I don't know. And the lady tried to hand her her child. And my sister goes, I've heard about this. And she reaches her hand down and grabs the lady's arm. The lady's hand is in her purse. And she was using the child as a disguise to get into her purse. And then the lady threw her child at my daughter, or I'm sorry, at Lacey, my sister. Just threw. Sorry, that got weird. But she threw the child, and my sister is pretty athletic, so she caught the kid in one hand while holding onto the lady's other hand, and then
stared deep into her soul as she did so.
Like she was like, help, 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 just screaming all this stuff, and my sister started screaming and everything else, and I mean, it got out of control. But yeah, that's also something that's kind of. So I'm scared of you, Danielle. That's what I'm circling around to.
So what you're saying though is I just wanted to point out that, it doesn't matter if you're an individual trying to make a buck or if you're a giant corporation. You're okay to use kids to get to what you need, right?
Yeah, circling back around.
Yeah,
yes,
there you go. All right, well, welcome to the show, our resident gypsy, Danielle here. Let me give you your lovely table here. We can get rid of this pillow. And so, for those of us, not us, but for those of our listeners who have not been familiar with tarot before, we encourage you to go check out last Tuesday, where we first had Danielle on. We talked a little bit about tarot, a little bit about the history of it, and how Danielle got involved into it. But today, we're just gonna do a reading, and I don't know, maybe this reading will be for me since we had one for Ryder last time.
Yes. Yes.
So let me turn this mic around for you and change the camera over.
Question as well, Danielle. Can you read for yourself? And you've said that you do, I think, but yeah. Would it be the same when you're reading for other people? Just kind of curious.
So that's a good question. I mean, I look at it as maybe I'm like helping someone else interpret for themselves, but you're still looking for like what the symbols mean to you, I guess. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I'm just, it's kind of a silly question maybe. I just kind of keep thinking to myself that like if I was reading for somebody else, there's just a different intentionality in it. And was thinking, of course, about, reading for Reed.
Oh yeah, reading Reed. That could be the segment.
Reading Reed. Okay.
It's just
yeah, I think so. Like when I'm shuffling, basically I'm just thinking I'm shuffling to do this reading for myself, or I'm shuffling to do this reading for Reed. And then, I mean, different people believe different things as far as like, oh, I am like asking my spirit guides, guardian angels to guide my hands so that I select when to stop shuffling. You can go further into that intentionality thing, but that's exactly what it is. It can have as much meaning as you want it to. So like I might do readings differently for myself, or different types of readings, but like for Reed, I'm just thinking this will be a good prompt for self-reflection this morning.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that we talked about last Tuesday was, at least the way Danielle views tarot, is it's all up for your own interpretation, right? And you get to decide how much something matters or doesn't matter and what it pops into your head, right? And does it really have some importance or higher level or spiritual connection? Like, that's up for you to decide. And in my personal opinion, I don't think it really matters. To kind of touch on what you were talking about earlier, when you were saying, well, what would you do if you knew? And it's like, I would apply the same question here. Like, okay, so it is a tied to a spiritual thing. It's like, okay, does that change anything? It's like, I guess maybe I believe in it more, or maybe I don't.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of it's a good question overall, but I actually was thinking about this the other day in terms of spirituality and religion. To not believe in anything or to claim that you don't believe in anything, it is really a stance that sort of de-empowers like the mystery that could be evoked all around you. And so if you decide, who cares? Well then, yeah, who cares? And because you don't care, then you're kind of like closing down a certain portion of the way your brain could operate or the way that you could see the world. So I'm just kind of curious sometimes about how people set themselves up to, I don't know, encounter that mystery.
Yeah, for sure. Well, with that, Danielle, what type of spread are you going to be doing today?
We're just going to stick with the past, present, future 3-card spread, and I'm going to let you cut the deck to begin. You can cut it, unstack it, restack it, however way you'd like.
Let's do that.
And then you want this one on top of that one?
Yep.
Okay.
I guess, yeah, I could have cut it and then stacked it right back on top, huh?
Let's see.
Yeah, I see how this relationship works. Reed makes a mess, Danielle cleans it up.
Exactly.
That's actually not how that usually goes. So.
Oh, man.
I'll admit that. Okay, so we'll look at the present. This is like a daily card for today. Oh. So this is the Empress, which is one of the major arcana, talks about major soul lessons and usually, so now all I'm thinking that popped into my brain is this card is usually like the card for like fertility and pregnancy.
You're
and
not
it's
biased
pointing,
in any way, are you
it's
here, Danielle?
pointing to me,
What?
Reed. It's pointing to me. I'm just saying. That's okay.
Please excuse us while we take 5 minutes. Take a break.
No.
Unrelated.
So, but it can also be talking about creativity. It's like feminine energy. So, like intuition and, like, I guess it can refer to like a mother's intuition. I'll have to come back to what that one could be talking about.
And I will say, since you said feminine energy, it made me think of
Your dress store?
yes,
Oh.
exactly, my dress store. It made me think of a Bo Burnham line. He said he's like a feminine Eminem.
Oh, well, because see, there's the what's that symbol? I think that's Venus. So yeah.
That's the one that is.
Well, and she's like the pair to the Emperor, who's the more masculine energy, like the, which is about the side of creativity that's like the action taking and the, taking charge. Whereas this is more of like the, I know what I want to do and I'm going to create from intuition side of things.
And so that is the present.
This is, yes, your
Okay.
your present daily card, something that is coming up for you to reflect on today.
And just real quick for our audio-only listeners, so this is a picture of a woman sitting in a chair, and she's got some fancy-looking hat on, looking kind of like a queen, and she's holding some sort of
Scepter?
scepter in her hand, I guess, and the number 3 is on the card.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay, and then we'll look at the past. So this is the Knight of Cups reversed. And this is actually, we were talking about the knights last week. All of the court cards within each suit. So this is the Knight of Cups. The suit is cups. The knight is one of the court cards, which actually refers to personality types. And this is my favorite because this is my personality type. And this card also came out as my daily card for myself yesterday.
Nice.
So like immediate past.
So is that the knight that impregnates the queen? Is that how this works?
Well, because like the knight,
After getting her drunk with
he's
that
like,
cup?
yeah, the Holy Grail. Oh, that's kind of dark.
Welcome to the podcast.
If she needs that stupid little thing that goes over your cup that they're advertising on Instagram now that I keep seeing that's sold
nice.
and marketed by a man, and it just makes me so mad because it's like putting the responsibility back on females to cover their drinks, whereas we should be targeting people and telling you don't put things in people's drinks. It makes me so mad.
Okay, so
sorry,
I did not
really
go to the
side.
roofie thing at first, but now I'm picking up on it. Thanks. Yeah.
Yep. I don't know why that I went there, but that was something I was thinking about yesterday.
Rubies.
So, well, this product on Instagram.
So what do you think this night represents with regards to me?
So with regards to the queen, the cup suit is water, which also refers to like relationships, intuition, creativity. So I see this card as like they're both reversed, which for me can mean it's talking about an internal issue, like it's, or versus relationships with the outward world. This could be talking about your relationship with yourself, or things happening totally inwardly. So this card, it's like I'm so obsessed with like finding purpose and meaning, and the knights are about like travel and movement and making a decision and then taking action on it. So this knight card in particular, I think, is talking about it is like that kind of holy grail mission, like going, and since it's reversed, taking that journey, going inward and deciding what is the goal, like what is the holy grail that you're trying to find.
This is in the past.
Yes.
So maybe looking at my past to analyze and
For
find out
clues.
what that holy grail is so I can go impregnate the queen. Got it.
Birth a creation.
But this is inside of you, this queen.
Inside of you. So just real quick to add a little bit, one for the audio only listeners and also for those who are still kind of wondering what the heck's going on here. So we have the cards laid out in front of Danielle, and basically she flips over 3 cards in a row. They're side by side, left to right. She started off with the middle one, which she said represents the present, and then she grabbed the one to her left, which she said represents the past. And she said that these cards are reversed because normally they would be flipped up facing her, the one reading the tarot. But since they are facing me, the one who's being read, that means that they're reversed, and that's one of those things that you can ascribe meaning to, prescribe or rescribe or describe.
Ascribe.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Yeah. So we've got the past and we've got the present, and then the last one is the future.
Oh, the 10 of Cups.
The 10 of Cups.
Whoa.
Which is not reversed.
That's so many cups.
Does that mean it's party time or what?
That's like basically like the ideal life fulfillment card.
Ah, nice combo.
So like you're deciding what your cup is that you're seeking, and then you get it at the end.
10. Look at
Well,
that.
look, you had
10
10
multiple.
kids. You had 1 kid, and
Is that leading to 10 kids? I don't know.
man.
There's only 2 in the picture, so.
Creative kids.
There you go.
Well, yeah, those could be like 2 little courses, or a live stream and a podcast and a YouTube channel. Like, you don't know. They could be relating to multiple things. But yeah, this is, I mean, it's all, I feel like it relates to the conversation we were having yesterday as well about like, you have to decide, figure out what you want before you can make the plan to like reach the end of the, like, this is the 10, it's the, out of the 1 through the 10, 10s are talking about like the end of your goal, the outcome, the result of the journey that you're going on through the 1 through the 10 of the cup suit, dealing with intuition and creativity. So
nice. Yeah, so just for the audio only, we've got a cup here, not a cup, a card here that's got the number 10 on it, and then it has looks like a man and a woman with their arms beholding the world in front of them, and there are 10 cups.
It's a rainbow of cups.
Yeah,
Cup bow.
the number 10 cups. And yeah, and there's some people maybe dancing in the background. So it seems like a kind of a celebratory, like, hey, here's what's coming in the future. You know, definitely not in the present, Reed. It's all the way in the future. You're going to have to wait.
well, if this was just talking about yesterday, like this could be talking about tomorrow.
Hey,
you don't know
I like
how
that.
long it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
I like that a lot.
I mean, the more cups you put in motion, like the more cups you can have tomorrow, you know?
I like that. And that's how we learn how to drink, you know? The more cups you have in motion, the more cups you'll see in motion.
Girls.
This just might be the aftermath of a party. Like every time I leave a party, there seems to be 300 cups that are all half drank sitting around.
Right.
So, yeah, who knows? You know, this overall looks really positive, though. I think the reading I got last week felt positive to me. This one feels positive for Reed, so.
I mean, for now, I think we should keep this gypsy around.
Keep giving us good news.
Yes. Dad, do you have any other thoughts on this reading, or is that pretty much it?
Well, maybe I'll give you some insight for tomorrow morning. We'll percolate.
All right, percolate like a good coffee. I like it.
Product placement.
Well, Ryder, before I spout one off the top of my head, do you have a challenge that you think might be good for today? You know, whether it's related to something having to do with privacy we were talking about, and talking about social media, advertising, whether it has to do with maybe looking into your past and seeing what is the important cup that you're looking for, that holy grail. Maybe it's looking at your present. Maybe it has to do with what is something that you are creating. Maybe it's physically like life. Maybe it's a plant. Maybe it's some creative thing that you're making. And then
we have so many prompts.
We have so many prompts, right?
So many.
It's something with the future and
Yeah.
the 10 cups that you are wanting to get at. Or maybe it has nothing to do with any of those things, just something that's on your head.
Oh, when I'm thinking about privacy stuff, because I'm going to just go back to that one. I asked a guy that was a security and IT expert, and he's worked for some major corporations doing this. And I was sort of saying, like, I was like, okay, so should I use DuckDuckGo as my search engine because Google is so intrusive with stealing everything from you, Bob? And he kind of said to me, he was like, it doesn't matter. They're all getting something from you. But one thing you should do is switch around between them so not one company has everything.
Just spread it around.
Spread it around. And so I think maybe that would be a challenge today is if you're accustomed to using Google, I don't know, try out DuckDuckGo, try out Search Page. There's a couple others that you can sort of jump into, and of course use your incognito as much as possible.
Which, an interesting aside for you, incognito is not as private as you would think. So real quick, I want to define a couple things that came out. So DuckDuckGo is a search browser, or a search engine, rather, as opposed to, say, Google or Bing or something like that. But they take privacy first. That's one of their main things, at least that they market, right?
Yeah.
And so writers encouraging you guys to basically, anytime someone says, hey, go Google that, just go to duckduckgo.com. And then you can search it there instead, and they have a little bit more respect of your privacy and selling your data and things like that. As far as I've heard, I've not looked into it myself personally.
Yeah. And there's some open source platforms as well that are trying to do this, but they are just brutal compared to Google. So you can do it, but you're just not going to get the search results. It's like taking the internet back about 7 or 8 years.
For sure. And one thing I want to really point out, like this privacy and security topic is a very big one. And one that we're going to talk about more for sure. So if you're worrying like, oh, we barely scratched the surface, don't worry about it. And if you're like, wow, they barely scratched the surface, I want to talk more. Don't worry, we'll wait a little while before we bring it up again. But yeah, with that, you guys have a wonderful day. Your challenge for today is maybe try out using a different search engine. It doesn't even necessarily need to be one of these privacy one, but just spread your data amongst other people, so other companies, so they don't all have it.
Is Ask Jeeves still a thing?
This is a great question. That's one way to find out.
Google it.
Yeah.
And then
I mean, DuckDuckGo it. Actually, funny aside, I just read a Wikipedia article the other day that apparently words with the letter K in them are the funniest words in the language. So therefore, DuckDuckGo is got to be funnier than Google.
Yeah, really killing it. All right, well, that is it for today. Everyone have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.